Well, good evening, everybody. What an amazing honor and privilege it is to be here this evening. As I look across this screen, I see some familiar names and faces, and others that I am meeting for the first time. But I am truly, truly looking forward to the time that we'll share together this moment. I want to thank all those who made this possible. So to each and every person from all the organizations that have partnered, I am truly, truly grateful and looking forward to ongoing opportunities to partner together for what will happen for our communities in the future. I believe that anytime you invite a preacher to share, even if it's about works that they've done, you gotta cross your fingers and hope they don't give you 3 points in a close after they told you they were going to close 3 times. So I am going to be obedient to the time that I've been granted and jump right in. The prayer has already been prayed, but I just want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit more about who I am and maybe why this particular book was written. This recent release is called Square One, has been told. Finding the courage to start over, stay strong, and shape your future. And if we've never had a chance to formally meet before, let me tell you a little bit about my history, my background, my story, which may give you a little bit of insight as to how this book came to be. I'm a former cancer patient, two tumors, total of 13 surgeries, 3 years of chemotherapy, and thought to die about 3 times. Even as I matriculated through the medical journey of my childhood, as I approached adulthood, became married, we still had setbacks. We, in the first year of our marriage, struggled with infertility and the fear that we would never be able to have children based on some of the reporting of doctors. At that time, I'm proud to say we do have two beautiful children, Madison and Jackson, who are now 8 and 6. If I step a little further into the present, I am presently, even now, dealing with some medical challenges in relationship to that medical journey. And I only share that with you to let you know I know a little bit about what it feels like to go 2 steps forward, to feel like sometimes you got to take 3 steps back, to feel like you've overcome one hurdle, to feel like you have to go back to the beginning again. But maybe medical journey hasn't been your journey. Maybe it's been professional, maybe it's been emotional, maybe it's been personal. And maybe just the last 2 years, there's been this little thing that's happened called COVID-19. If you haven't heard about it, it really shut us all down. And this was really where the book birthed. I want to be honest with you. I remember about 3 weeks into the pandemic, I went to our staff and I said, hey, we got to help people get through the next couple of months because it's going to be a little weird. So I'm going to do a sermon series just to help people navigate the next 8 to 12 weeks. And 2 years later, someone came back to me and said, hey, you know that series you preached 2 years ago? I think we may still need that communication and content now. And that prompted a pursuit to produce this work. And so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about that journey. And I want to start with this quote, because no matter where you're at in your life journey, personally, professionally, there's all of us have these moments where square one emerges. If it wasn't a pandemic, it may be in relationship, if it's professional, if it's vocational. And I love this quote by Samuel Beckett. He says, ever tried, ever failed, doesn't matter, try again, fail, fail better. I'm gonna say it again. Samuel Beckett says, ever tried, ever failed, doesn't matter, try again, fail again maybe, but fail better. The reality of it is this idea of square one shows up in all of our lives. And it doesn't take a pandemic for us to feel like sometimes disappointment, setback, or just challenges emerge and maybe unexpectedly. And so over the last several weeks, you might have been looking at marketing and how to start a business and all of these topics that are so grounding and truthfully give us optimism about what can be accomplished, what we can do, how to plan, how to produce. But what I really want to deal with tonight is what do you do when things don't go as planned? I know we all have a plan. I'm a pastor. I know we pray for the plan. But every now and then, the plan doesn't go according to plan. And as we begin to look at our journeys, I want us to be able to wrestle with tonight and be able to equip you with tools for what to do when things don't go as planned, what to do when things don't go into as planned in your personal development plan, what to do when your business launches and things aren't taking off as quickly as you anticipated, what to do when you thought you had 5 partners and 2 back out, what to do when you thought everything was ideal and then something emerges in your life that rocks you to the core and foundation. And now you have to navigate emotion and professionalism. You got to try to keep a smile on your face to close the deal while you crying in the closet or in the car before you walk in. How do we navigate square one seasons? And so in order to accomplish this, throughout this book, I begin to highlight something we call returning to the core. And it's going to be the crust of our conversation tonight. Core is defined as the central or most important part of something. And throughout this book, I outline 4 core approaches that we have to take as we navigate square one seasons. We all have them. And listen to me, square one is not a moment just to wait for the future. It's an opportunity for you to work on your future. If you're a note taker, I hope you are. Please write that down. Square one, no matter how it shows up in your life, is not a moment just to wait for your future. It is still an opportunity for you to work on your future. And there are 4 ways we're going to learn to do that tonight. Now, I talk fast and I'm gonna let you drink from a fire hose for the next 20 minutes. And then we're gonna open it up for questions. And so please feel free to be thinking about how you wanna bring these things to light. But I'm gonna jump in and talk about 4 ways to approach square one seasons as you look to continue to bring your plans and purpose to life in a season that's less than ideal. The first one is this: whenever we approach a square one season, we need to evaluate our commitments. The first thing we need to do is evaluate our commitments. Again, what are we wrestling with tonight? Great business plan, great personal development plan. Maybe at the beginning of 2020, you had a vision board, you had a party, you told everybody what you was gonna do, and then 2021 hit, and you said, I'm gonna do everything I said I was gonna do in 2020, and then 22 hit, and you still ain't done it. And so we're all together in some of that, right? Maybe we get a few of things or some of those things. What do? The first thing we'd have to do is evaluate our commitment. Here's why. If everything is a priority, nothing is. I'm gonna say it again. If everything is a priority, nothing is. And oftentimes when it comes to leadership, business, professional development, personal development, a lot of people talk about managing money. A lot of people talk about managing even relationships. I don't think enough of us talk about managing energy. Ultimately, commitments are about where your energy goes. I don't know about you guys, but I can testify to the fact that I have walked into some important conversations, but I was not the best version of myself when I showed up because I had managed the money, I had managed the spreadsheet, I had managed the proposal, but I hadn't managed my energy. Some of us can testify to that in some personal development. I'm working hard in this season, but I'm not getting the right rest. I'm not getting the right time to focus on my ideas or my innovation. And so I'm managing a lot, but I'm not really managing my energy. And ultimately, our commitments are about where does our energy go. Now, I want to be fair about this because you do have to be active in square one seasons. You do have to be active as you're building a business or building your personal development plan. And activity often precedes alignment. Here's what I mean by that. You do have to sometimes try some things, fail at some things, try again, fail better, as we talked about in the beginning. But you do have to remain active, but you have to remain active in wisdom. And the only way we can do that is by evaluating our commitments in every season. Why? Because every season, every commitment is not eternal. Some commitments are seasonal, right? And I struggle with this, maybe like many of you, because I would like to consider myself somebody who, when I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. And some of us can testify to the fact that as we are building our own personal development in life, we just find ourselves just overcommitted. Why? Because commitments are easy to hide, but they can be hard to change. They can be easy to hide, but hard to change. So I've outlined really quickly 4 blind spots that show up in our commitment, in the management of our energy. I'm gonna run through these really quickly. Hopefully you self-identify. If you do, just throw in the chat, that's me, that's me. Just this is safe space, okay? So the first one we have is the fulfillment forger. These are those of us who we find fulfillment in how much we're committed to. So as long as our calendar is full, we feel like we're doing a lot, right? And it's really a forgery because we're not maybe doing the best of things or the things that are truly connected to our fulfillment. But as long as we're doing a lot, we feel like, okay, I'm doing something. And so sometimes we got to take inventory. Am I doing a lot of things or am I doing the right things? I heard this quote recently about balance, and it said this: balance is not giving myself equally to all things. Balance is bringing the best version of myself to the most important things in the right season. And so, as we begin to think about this first blind spot, that's something to think about. The second one is this, and I made this word up, but this is me. This is my personal testimony. Some of us struggle with commitment and energy because we are the yes mess maker. We just say yes to everything. We don't think about the implications. We don't think about our calendar. We just say yes. People ask, we say yes. People say, can you help? You say yes. People ask you, can you show up? You say yes. And then we wonder, where has my energy gone to give the best version of myself to the right projects, the right people, the right proposals, the right development? And it's like, man, all of my time has been given away because I say yes and then I try to figure it out later, right? And so the yes person can make a mess unintentionally. That's me. I'm testifying to myself. The third one is this: the noble need meter. This is the most admirable of the bunch because all of us like to be known as good people. So we sign up for this stuff that people are going to pat us on the back and they're going to say, man, look at you just out there again. You so nice. You so kind. You is smart. You is kind. You is all of that. And you is tired. You is exhausted. And then we're trying to figure out, why is it that I feel stuck and I can't still shape my future out of this square season because we have done some noble things, but maybe out of alignment of the right season. And then the last one is the comparison camper. These are those of us who constantly compare our lives to others. And so we're launching a new thing or we're doing a new thing because we saw somebody else do it, or we're comparing ourselves to someone else's pace. And we sometimes move out of our own divine pace. Look, here's the thing about blind spots: either they get checked or they get a crash, right? And so we have to be mindful of these because ultimately this is about managing our energy. Again, your marketing plan can be great, your business plan can be awesome, but you also need energy to execute that well. And that energy is often found in commitment. And so one of the things we want to do to respond to these blind spots is do these three things really quickly. Number one, we want to name our values, schedule our values, and then you want to protect your values. This is how we respond to evaluating our commitments in this season. No matter what square you may be in, you want to name your values, right? You want to schedule your values, because if a value isn't scheduled, if it's not scheduled, it's not valuable. And then we want to protect those values as best we can. This is the first step to navigating a square one season. We want to evaluate our commitments. Here's the second one, though. As we return to the core, so the C stands for commitments. The second thing, the O, stands for you want to own your outlook. You got to own your outlook. Outlook is defined as a point of view or attitude towards life, right? So what does it take for us to own our outlook? I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had an opportunity at the early part of last year to go on my first hike ever. I had never been on a hike. And I was with a group of people who said, hey, Vernon, we're going to go on a hike. And if everybody's going, you got to go. And so I went, and I complained the whole way up. I thought it was, I was like, I don't know why I said yes to this. Why did I sign up for this? I probably, because of comparison, I felt like, man, they challenged my pride. But when I got to the top, the view was beautiful. And it sparked a love in me, not because the journey was easy for hiking, not because the journey was easy, but because I now knew that if I can survive the journey, I can see something a way I've never seen it before. Here's what I want you to understand today if you're taking notes. Attitude always precedes altitude. For many of us, the reason why we are struggling to see things in a different way is because our attitude is not allowing us to elevate our perspective. And here's why that happens, right? Obstacles impede optimism. So you had your business plan, you had your marketing strategy, you launched it. Things didn't grow as fast as you wanted. You feel like you're back at square one. The business deal fell through. The relationship didn't pan out the right way. Or maybe personal development. You said you had this goal. You said you had this strategy. It didn't work out just like you planned. And when we experience obstacles, they often impede optimism. We have to protect our outlook. And so here are 3 ways to really think about protecting and owning your outlook. The first one is always, and you're doing this tonight, grow your exposure. The more you see, the more encouraged you become. You want to grow your exposure. This second one is really practical. I hope you're ready for this one. Guard your screen time. What I am finding more often than not in my research, as I was writing this book, is that so often progress was impeded by what they were watching in other people's lives. And while they were watching, they weren't walking out their own purpose in their own lives. So guard your screen time. For some of us, that's television. For some of us, that's our computer. For a lot of us, that's our phone. I don't want to step on too many toes because I might get in trouble and I want to be invited back. I'm going to move on to the third one. And the last thing, to own your outlook, get your game face on. Now, that seems like it's really cliche, but I want to tell you a quick story. I had an opportunity to meet with a Hall of Fame coach by the name of Tony Dungy. He became a mentor for me in the last season, and he gave me this kind of glass football from his Hall of Fame induction. And I remember sitting down and I was having a conversation with him, and I was talking to him about this idea of, like, you coached all of these great players, you coached all of these Hall of Famers, and what's the secret? What's the strategy? He began to tell me that there's actually a psychological principle about getting the game face on. He talked about the game of the year mentality. And he said that what they found in sports research was that if a team thought they were playing an opponent that they were better than, they automatically played down to the level of their opponent. Automatically, they played less than their best. They did not perform at their potential because they assumed it was a give me. It wasn't until they understood this sports psychology that he said, one of my things that I did for every team I coached is I made every game feel like the game of the year. Hey, this game matters. This game is important for this reason. And he said, any tool I could use to spark that mentality in them, I pulled. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. Too often, we are not performing and producing at our potential because we are looking at how well we did comparison to somebody else. Maybe we are looking, even giving ourselves this grace, but I want you to look at your life and say, wait a minute, every proposal, every meeting, every conversation, how do I get my game face together? How do I summon that mentality that says this is not an opportunity to be wasted? Why? Because the square in your life is not a moment just to wait on your future. It's an opportunity to work on your future. So we got to own our outlook. Here's the third one. Third one, and one of my favorites. If we are going to navigate square one seasons in professional life, in personal life, in development, we have to return to the core, our commitments, our outlook. The R stands for build your resilience. Build your resilience. I cannot emphasize this enough. Fires are often happens. What often happens is we kind of have this mentality, like some people either have it or you don't. And I don't believe that's true. I actually believe that resilience can be developed. I love what Angela Duckworth says. She says, enthusiasm is common. Endurance is rare. I'm gonna say it again. Enthusiasm is common. Endurance is rare. And so what I want to spark in you tonight prayerfully is just a heart of endurance. Like, look, things will happen. Don't give up. Things won't always work according to plan. Don't give up. Yes, it may have fell through. Don't give up, because you can have resilience. I want you to think about this idea when you think about resilience, but you cannot strengthen what you do not stretch. So we are going to work on stretching ourselves in square one seasons. We're not just going to wallow. We're not just going to sit back and complain. I know you got 2 friends you can always call and they're going to hear you vent, but you need 2 more friends who are going to say after the vent, what are we going to do? We cannot strengthen what we do not stretch. And I want to be clear about this. Resilience is not about ignoring your reality. It's about having an appropriate response to your reality. If I could, I want to share a really quick scripture that I think puts this in context, and then I'm going to be practical. I love what 2 Corinthians 4, verse 8 through 9 and 16 through 18 says. This is from the New Living Translation. Paul is writing this, and if anybody knows anything about Paul, he knows a little bit about things not going according to plan. I mean, he was in prison, he was shipwrecked, he was talked about, he was casted out by church people and non-church people. He just had all types of conflict surrounding him. And here's what he writes. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We may even get knocked down, but we will not be destroyed. Then he goes to verse 16 and says this. This is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our attention on things that can't be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. I don't know if that encouraged you. I'm a preacher. I got excited reading that for myself. I just want to encourage you, the season you may be in, or maybe you're in a great season right now. Can I tell you something? Maybe everything's working according to plan, but I want you to hold on to this for that day, for that moment, for that email, for that text message where everything hits and you're like, oh my goodness, after all of this progress, I got to go back to here. After all of this work, I got to start right here. After that many conversations, we got to talk about this again. I know my married people can testify to that, right? We all have those moments show up. Let's remember Paul's words. Some things will be gone, but let's focus on the future. And so here are 3 resilience hacks that I have used in my journey when I've approached square one seasons at a very practical level. Number 1, systemize failure. Now, I know that word is a trigger for some of y'all. You don't like failure. You don't fail. You won't claim failure. Systemize failure. Here's what I mean by that. We have to learn to become more comfortable stretching ourselves and being okay failing. I've gotten into working out a lot over the last 5 years. And when I started working out, I made a decision. There was a member of our church who played running back in the NFL, and he was in off season. And he said, Pastor Vernon, I want to do a workout with you. It was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. And one of the things he said he wanted to do, he said, one of the workouts they do is they lift to fail. And I said, why would you do that? He said, because we have to exhaust this muscle to its highest capacity for us to be able to build on it. For many of us, we don't even know how far we can go until we push ourselves to the point of failure. And so be okay trying to the point of failure. Be okay saying, man, I stretched myself for that one and it didn't work out exactly as planned, but systemize failure. And here's what that does. If you can learn to familiarize yourself with failure, when it shows up unexpectedly, it won't be an unfamiliar face for you. For many of us, we play in safe space. And then when a failure shows up, it's the first moment we've ever felt that feeling. And so we retreat, it kills optimism. And so I want you to actually start to strategically place opportunities in your life for you to do something that's so uncomfortable and so stretched that you're like, man, I didn't achieve that the way I wanted. And here's the key to systemizing failure. It may not be the most public thing. Certainly it shouldn't be the thing that's going to kill the progress of your business, but you can find ways to scale opportunities for you to systemize failure. I'll just give you a quick example of how I do this as a preacher. People, when it comes to ministry and public speaking, you're expected every sermon to do well. And in the summer months, I try to find 3 weeks, and our staff knows this, But I say, I'm gonna stretch myself this week, guys, and I want to improve as a communicator. So I'm gonna try a different approach. And I just want to give y'all a heads up. It may not work. The way I'm approaching this may not work, but I'm going to learn something from it. And I am systemizing that I don't think people are going to leave the church because of 2 bad sermons. I know some people do, but I want to put on my calendar the opportunity to try something new. Second thing we're going to do, 3 resilience hacks. The second thing we're going to do, set standard goals and stretch goals. I'm sure many of you have heard of that before, but I just want to name that. Don't just be comfortable with goals you know you can reach, but for every standard goal, set a stretch goal as well, right? Some of the goals of your life need to not be at just the level you are, but the level of your future. And then the last thing you need to do is seek feedback constantly, right? Seek feedback constantly. Be okay with people telling you it was just okay. Be okay with people telling you that wasn't your best. Be okay with hearing what it takes to grow. I love what Robert Jordan says about when resilience shows up in our life, or the need for resilience. He says, the oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must, and it survived. It's okay to bend. Just don't break, right? Be okay building your resilience. Here's the last thing. If we are going to manage square one seasons professionally, personally, in all stages of life, we have to manage our emotions. We got to manage our emotions. Here's the reality. We all experience them. Emotions show up in every season of our life. The question is simply this: either your emotions are going to manage you or you're going to manage them, right? Emotions are not to be avoided. They should be acknowledged, but they have to take a back seat, not the driver's seat. And so as we build our futures, as we build our plans, as we build our strategies, be prepared that emotions will show up, but we can overcome them. I want you to think about this when it comes to managing your emotions. The first thing you can do is reposition people. I know some of y'all not gonna like that part, but here's what we all know to be true. In some seasons, you got to reposition people because you don't need everybody to fall apart with you. And so who do I need close to me in a square one season that I may not need close to me in a different season? Reposition people. Number 2, evaluate environments. One of the exercises that I encourage people to do is I say, write down the feeling you leave your most frequented environments with. What are the places I go and I leave and I feel like I can conquer the world? What are the places I leave and I feel like the world is conquering me? And then in a square one season, schedule your values around environments that feed that optimism and feed your faith, not kill it. All right. So evaluate your environments. And the last thing you do, and this is for, I really love this passage of scripture where Jesus is talking to the disciples and he's telling them, I tell you, if you speak to the mountain, it will be moved. And I love this. He doesn't say speak about the mountain. He says speak to it. And there's a proverb that I think runs through every vein of our life. It says, speak those things into existence as though they were. Why? Because life and death lies in the power of the tongue. And so I want to encourage you to do this last thing when it comes to managing your emotions. Speak to the mountain, not just about it. I know you're going to take all the content you received from the last few weeks and you have ways to write business plans and you have all the practical strategies. But can I just encourage your heart for a moment? There are going to be some times where the mountain seems bigger than your mission. There are going to be some times where the mountain seems bigger than your plan. There are going to be some times where the mountain feels bigger than your network and your net worth. You can talk about the mountain, but Jesus didn't say talk about it. He said talk to it. And he said, if you would speak to this mountain, it would be moved. So let's be mindful of our own mouth and speak to some stuff, not just around it. I say this lastly, I was really moved by finding this out. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Wizard of Oz. And don't judge me. I like The Wizard of Oz a little more than The Wiz. We'll talk about that later. Don't log off. But there's this song in there that Judy Garland talks about, the rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I was really interested to find out the origins of that song were actually written by a Russian Jewish immigrant whose family was navigating the Holocaust. That when he talks about the lyrics like chimney tops it takes on new meaning because he's actually writing an ode to his family who is trying to hold on to hope in the midst of a tragic and a turbulent time. And he's encouraging to say somewhere over those chimney tops, somewhere over that rainbow, there's birds singing, and there is a future waiting for you, a preferred possibility, preferred future, dreams, and a land that you can pursue. And I want to encourage you today. Maybe you're looking at your life and you feel like, man, I'm back at square one. Things have not gone according to plan. I promise you this, there's a rainbow for you too. And you can choose to write your song for the season. So don't let your emotions manage you. Manage them, because God still has a future waiting on you. Start over, stay strong, shape your future. And when all else fails, feel better, because God has something waiting for you. All right? I'm going to stop there.
That was awesome, Pastor Gordon. Oh, man, that was awesome. You had me all the way up to the whiz now. Hold on. That was awesome, Pastor Gordon. No, seriously, that was great. I got pages of notes, man. I own your outlook. Come on. Name your value, schedule your value, and protect it. Come on, that's awesome. You were talking to me, guys. This is awesome. So this is Q&A time, everyone. So if you got questions for Pastor Gordon, please raise your hands or type them in the chat so we can activate microphones and get you to engage. This is really good stuff. All right, Susan Lee, please unmute yourself. This is Gethsemane royalty, y'all. Sue Lee. Hey, girl.
Oh, please. Hello, Pastor Gordon. It's so wonderful to see you.
Good to see you as well.
This was absolutely fantastic. Can you please repeat the core again? I want to make sure that I have all four.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you in shorthand, and then I'll tell you the longer writing. So when we talk about returning to our core, it's about commitments, outlook, resilience, and emotions. In any square one season, we want to start evaluating our commitments, owning our outlook, building our resilience, and managing our emotions.
That's good. That is so good. Other questions? Thank you, Sue. Other questions? Let's see. Are you trying to?
I'm wondering if my daddy trying to talk.
Okay, yeah, let's unmute you. I think so. Oh, is he waving?
Vernon Gordon's up here. Oh, he waving. Okay.
Okay. Other questions, please key them in if you have them. Comments, questions, whatever you feel led to do. But if you have questions, we certainly would like you to raise your hand so we can activate microphones or key in.
I'm an open book. I'll take anything.
Ashley Mack, you're just there you go. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I don't live in Norfolk anymore. I relocated and I'm in Indiana, so I had to join this. So thank you for this. This is a very timely word and seminar, so I appreciate it.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
I have a question. When it comes to building your resilience, how do we continue to do a better job of balancing that? And I say that just because we know, just all of us, I'm sure, carry how much of a burden or just carry the world on our shoulders, right? Not to mention just how much of resilience we know Black America by itself to be. So when we come to starting over, when we come to building and starting from ground zero, how do we keep the balance of your resilience and making sure that doesn't become your characteristic or personality? You know, it's just that we're using this to help better us for what is to come.
That is really great. So a few things that I would say there. One, I think whenever we talk about resilience, I want to make sure that when we think about even the book Square One, one of the things I talk about is for some of us, we may be at different phases in the Square One journey too. So we may not necessarily be starting all the way over, but we might be feeling like, how do I sustain strength in this season, right? Which is to stay strong. Some of us were like, okay, I stayed strong, then I'm shaping, right, this future. One of the things I think resilience is about is not that we're always going back to square one, but it is about being able to accept our new reality. And I think part of what we have to do sometimes is be able to settle into our new reality before we can work from it. So sometimes resilience doesn't look like holding the world on our shoulders. It's just saying, okay, my heart is ready to acknowledge the new world that exists, right? Mm-hmm. The relationships have changed. This is my new world that exists, right? And sometimes the most courageous thing we can do, and the thing that takes the most strength, is acknowledging our new reality, mm-hmm. right? And so I think that strength. I also think, to your point, Ashley, is a wonderful point you made about this idea that we sometimes feel, and we experience as Black Americans. I recently, I was able to go to our church, did a women's night, and there was like a mom's conversation, and we talked about how mothers carry the world on their shoulders. And I think these things can show up in our life in different ways. I think vulnerability, we often make the stepchild of strength. So I also think equally as important as resilience looking like our ability to carry, another form of resilience is our ability to be vulnerable about what we can't. Because it takes strength to also say, and going back to commitments, right? I can't carry all of this anymore the same way. And so I think one of the things we have to do is give ourselves permission and give ourselves grace to say, I'm not going to be able to sustain resilience if I try to carry all of these commitments. So something's got to go. And that takes courage as well. And this is the last thing I would just say really about building resilience too. Like, it's okay to know that, that I need not only support, but sometimes seasonally, like resilience doesn't always look like trying to hold it together. Sometimes resilience can also look like, what kind of partnerships do I need to build in this season so that I can endure the season? I think when we think about resilience, we think, what can I do? When I think even what scripture shows us is, what can y'all do? Right? So if we look at Ecclesiastes 3, he's always like, if one falls, another can lift him up, right? So I would say too, don't mistake resilience for all of us for what you can only do alone. Also be considerate for who may God be connecting you to help you carry the season's weight.
Thank you. I think that thoroughly answered it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. Michelle Dumas, please unmute. Hey.
Hey, TC, how are you?
Hey.
Hey, Pastor G.
Hey.
A question for you. When you talked about systemizing your failures, failure is such a negative perception. And for myself, when I think of failures, I struggle with turning that failure around to making it feel like a positive. So when you say like systemize your failures, I think that word failure, and when we get to that point in our minds, I just failed at this, I just hung the place up, turning it around to, as you could say, get in a comfortable position where we feel like we're stretching ourselves instead of it being like a failure. Can you elaborate on how you have that mind shift?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying, this journey and kind of not affinity, but this comfort with failure started with a statement that was made to me by a mentor in a previous season. And he said, in order to be successful at anything, you have to determine what you're willing to fail at. And this is where my starting point was. He said, in order to be successful at anything, you have to determine what you are willing to fail at. The first thing I think we all have to acknowledge is that if you're going to be successful, you're going to fail at something. I'll give you an example. So if you're going to be a successful student, college, whatever, you going to have to fail at being the best partier. Like, and there's some people do the opposite, right? They're like, what I'm known for, I start the party and end the party, but I might be failing in class. But that's a lighthearted way of looking at it. But in business, sometimes we succeed in a certain vocational aspiration, but what we may choose to sacrifice, or another word for it, fail at, is being completely accessible to a whole bunch of other things, some of our recreational activities, because we have to give a certain focus in a season. One other example, I believe that kind of maybe makes this stick, is when we decide to work out and we say, I'm going to change my body, and we're gonna fail at being good at eating out, but we are systemizing that I am no longer going to be inviting this into my life in the same way. So I think part of what we have to do is recognize that success requires some sense of sacrifice somewhere else in everything we do. So that kind of got me more familiar with the language of failure. I think the other thing we have to do is write into our seasons or write into our life's rhythm off seasons. And here's what I mean by that. You know, every athlete I've ever talked to, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, has said, I choose to fail in the off season. They said, what you don't see is the amount of shots I missed, the amount of times I, lost, the amount of times I did that, because I intentionally had a season in my life that was designed for me to experience failure for the sake of development. I think what often happens in our lives is that there's no off season. So we think we always have to be producing, right? We always got to be winning. We always got to be achieving. And I think that is an unhealthy rhythm. I don't think we have to find those seasons of our life where we can say, hey, not that we're failing at producing profit or providing for our families or being wise in our health, but maybe to say, okay, I'm going to take the next 30 days and I'm gonna be comfortable trying some things and doing some things that could produce amazing fruitfulness or could produce amazing learning, but that learning may come through what feels like failure. Does that make sense? So what I mean by systemizing failure is don't be afraid to try things that don't work out, because it could be that season produces great fruit, or it could just produce great learning for future fruit. But we got to write those off seasons into our schedule, systemize those so that we don't get so afraid to try that which may not work out. If that makes sense. Maybe language is a little barrier there, but hopefully that adds up a little bit.
No, that was good.
Thank you.
That's excellent, excellent. Lauren Spicer, please unmute yourself so we can. Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
Hey.
Oh, thank you so much. That everything you said, I take a lot of notes, so I really appreciate everything that you've shared, especially your own testimony, because we overcome by the blood of the Lamb, the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And your testimony shows that you've overcome. You know, there's been a lot going on across our country, and it's very traumatic. And one of the things that I'm called to do is intercessory prayer. And I had to learn how to give things up to God. I would find myself weighted by the things that I was praying about. And the Holy Spirit had to let me know that He didn't expect me to carry heavy things that were too heavy for me to carry.
Yep.
But lately, what's been going on is way too heavy for me to carry. And I just was thinking, you know, when you were talking about attitude and altitude, and when you're just going on and you're about to write a proposal or write a grant, and you look up, and I'm in education. I've been a principal, a reading specialist, a teacher. And I've taught children's church for years, and third and fourth grade, those were my kids. So, oh my goodness, I don't have to bring all the details in, but and then I grew up in one of the roughest neighborhoods in South Philadelphia, and I didn't even realize until they started talking about the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. I didn't realize how much secondary trauma was just so normal for me. I didn't even entertain the concept of secondary trauma, but I feel like it's happening again with all that's going on. And how do you know how the Word of God says for us to rejoice with those who rejoice and to with those. I'm trying to not have this. I want to definitely have compassion, because I feel like with all the TV and with the amount of violence in movies and all, we could kind of look at the news and then finish eating, and it's something that should have actually taken our appetite. So how do we do this thing? Like, how do we not have a sustained period of heaviness?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, thank you for acknowledging that there are some significant things happening in the world around us. And I do not want to pretend to have answers that certainly are above me, and certainly don't want to try to speak outside of my professional experience as it pertains to how we deal with particularly trauma. And we, one of the things we always say, we encourage, talking to somebody is healthy. But what I would say is a couple of things. Number one, I think you already initiated one thing, which is I think the purpose of prayer is not just for God to respond to us, but for us to be reminded that God wants to be there with us. I think oftentimes when we think about God Emmanuel, we think about Emmanuel in Christmas season, but that is a part of God's character in every season. And so the first thing I would encourage any of us who are navigating that trauma and the challenges of life and our overexposure in this world, which is absolutely legitimate, is to be very cognizant to build prayer into our rhythm and routine with more regularity and intentionality. If we needed to pray every morning, we need to pray 3 times a day with all that we're experiencing right now. So I certainly don't want to undermine or under communicate the value of that at a spiritual level. I think at a practical level, one of the things I do think we're all probably experiencing to some degree culturally, and this is a generalization, is compassion fatigue. This idea that our overexposure is causing us to be numb and desensitized to some of the experiences that we're witnessing over and over again. And so my encouragement in that is, and particularly through the lens of the book, is to, number one, make sure that you are, again, thinking about environments very strategically. Who are the people and where are the places that I gotta find myself to support me in this season? Because in some seasons, some people may be great people, but they may not be great for us in the season. We may need, so we got to be very cognizant of that. And then the second thing, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Travorce, is that we got to also be very mindful of how we are exposing our overexposure. And sometimes we just got to say, my family, we just went no week with a TV. Not because I think one of the things we feel like is not burying your head in the sand. If you just say, I can't take anymore. There is wisdom in knowing when you can't take anymore. And so I think some of us have to be okay to acknowledging that we're not ignoring our responsibility to the world around us by saying, hey, I might need to take a break because I've seen too much and I've seen enough. And I have enough to pray about now to intercede for without adding on. So thank you for naming that as well. I think we may have one more question. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Lauren. And I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. Looked like Maria to Cisse, your microphone is active, or excuse me, you just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Pastor.
Hey.
How are you doing? Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Yes, you said it almost right. It's Maria. Thank you. I just came at the tail end, and I was really excited when I saw what the discussion was going to be about. I was just like, this is exactly what I needed. And I want to, say thank you again for the opportunity for this platform to be able to have this conversation. And what you've been saying have been things that I have attempted to do, as far as surrounding myself with people that are supportive and, following my faith and things like that. So I actually lost my mother in 2015. And so I started a charity in her honor, to honor the good work that she's done. So I have, been having a little bit of a self-doubt as far as, with the charity and the business and things like that, because I have started to think in my head, I've failed in my personal life, my professional life. I was, homeless. I lost my, good paying job. And I was just like, how can I help other people when I'm not in a strong position? But I have just continued to allow my faith to, lead me, because I keep telling, I have these, sometimes self-doubt conversations, because I'm like, girl, you don't have the money for you to, pay for, the 501c3. How are you going to do this? And then all of a sudden, God seems to bless, the path for it to be possible. I'm just like, okay, I don't have, the funds to pay for this. And all of a sudden it happens, So I'm trying to work on not having these negative conversations. And I do try to talk to God, frequently, like right now I'm on my lunch break at work, and I, have a conversation and tell God what's going on with me. But as well, I allow, what goes on around my personal life to affect everything else, because I'm just like, how can I help anyone else when I can't even truly help myself, because I'm not in a better position of the people that we're trying to help.
Certainly. Well, great. First of all, again, we're praying for you and want to acknowledge that as you continue to pursue purpose. I think, I speak for all when I say we want to just encourage you, don't give up. We'll really, really lean into that Pauline passage. And I wish I could begin to tell you all the many stories I have heard of people as I was writing not only this book, but in my own personal journey as a pastor who, because they didn't give up in a season, they had no idea what God had waiting for them on the other side of their struggle. So I want to encourage you in that. Few practical things I want to give you as well, though. I'm going to start with kind of faith, and then I'm going to end it very practical. First, I always love to tell people faith in the Greek, it's in scripture, is both a noun and a verb. So faith is both descriptive and prescriptive, right? So there's a side of faith that is descriptive of how you feel about, okay, I got to believe in God, that there's more than this. There's also a side of faith that's a verb, which is prescriptive, which means faith is not just about what you wait for. Faith is about what you work towards. So faith always has partnership, right? It is what I believe, but then it's belief to the point of action. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do is, even if you don't know the last step yet, keep taking the next step.
That's good.
One of the next steps that I always tell people when you don't got no money, and please hear me, when we started TLC, in comparison to a lot of people who started churches, we did not have a lot of resources. But one thing you can always work on in every season, no matter your revenue, is your storytelling. I cannot emphasize this enough for anybody who ever wants to be an entrepreneur, for anybody who ever wants to run a charity, nonprofit, any phase. Your ability to tell the story of what it is that you're called to do has walked me into more doors than any network or any revenue could. And I just really cannot impress that upon you enough, is that work, even now, if you don't have money, start to work on your story. How do I tell it? How do I tell it in 2.5 minutes? How do I tell it in a way that's powerful? How do I tell it in a way that is representative of the vision and mission that I have? And so work with what you have, not what you don't. I got my story, and my bank accounts can't take that away. If your charity's in the name of your mom, how am I telling that story? And so work that story, and God will open up doors. And the last thing I just say is, and I really heard this, I'm taking this. In March, I had an opportunity to sit with John Maxwell, and he said that success and failure should never be separated. And Michelle, I wish I would have said this to you as well. He said we had just left a room, and he was talking to some business leaders, and he said, all of those business leaders I was just talking to 2 years ago told me no, they wouldn't talk to me. So he said, was that failure 2 years ago, or was that preparation for success?
That's good.
He said, what looked like failure 2 years ago look like success to you today, simply because I didn't let that square one moment stop me. I let it reshape my proposal. So right now, what you're looking at is maybe like, man, I just don't know how this is going to work out. And I've had failures, but never stop separating success and failure. Say this failure is only going to serve to shape my future success. And so I hope that's encouraging to you. And I hope that you continue to press forward, and know we're praying for you as well. So thank you.
It definitely encourages me. If it didn't help her, it helped me. Right on time. So Allie, I know there are a couple questions in the chat. We're right here at 8:03, and I want to be conscious of time. So if we could get those questions in the chat, and then we'll look to transition and give Pastor Gordon any closing remarks, and of course your closing remarks, Allie, and then we'll close in prayer. So
Sounds like a plan. So Miss Shakara, she asked, how can you push through professionally when going through a personal storm?
Whew.
It's a heavy one.
It's a great question. And if I could, I want to share probably from that perspective with some vulnerability. So, as has been stated, I am I'm a preacher, but as a communicator, you're expected to be together when you step on stage every week. And we have a staff of about 14, and it's been really complicated lately and nuanced because not only have I been navigating some of my own personal medical challenges, but my mother has been navigating some medical challenges. My daughter has been navigating some challenges. We just did an assessment for her, which turned out good. Thank God. But the waiting for those results to come in still produced anxiety as a parent. And there were many days where I felt like, man, I gotta keep showing up professionally, and I just don't feel like I'm together personally. So I'd say 3 things that I'd encourage you to do, and I don't know your context specifically, so some of these may apply and some of these may not. But the first thing I would encourage you to do is where you can be vulnerable. Maybe if it's an employer, maybe if you have a great working relationship, like where you can be vulnerable, share and see where support can be provided. What I've often found is this: people can't support what they don't know exists.
Right.
And so in the midst of me trying to show up and smile and act like I had it all together, the moment my team found out where I was personally, they worked alongside me to provide margin because they cared for me. And so that, again, may be appropriate to your context, may not, but that's the first thing I would tell you to do where it is appropriate. Use vulnerability as a tool, not as a liability, right? So I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would encourage you to do is be okay reframing your wins. One of the things I think we do in our culture a very bad job of is we kind of set wins for ourselves and goals, and then when life changes and personally things go different, or we go back to a square one season, we feel guilty about the fact of, well, this is where I said I was going to be this year, but your life has changed. And I said I was going to achieve all of this. My family dynamic has changed. And so give yourself the grace to change your scoreboard, to change your wins. Like if I could give you, like say, you know what? I said I was going to do 5 contracts, but man, I did not expect in March this was going to happen. So now, you know what? I did 3, and that's okay. And so be okay reframing your wins and changing your wins in a way that is commensurate with the realities of your present reality, right? And then the last thing I would encourage you to do when you got to show up professionally, but you're navigating things personally, is build more margin into your life. This one is a big one for me. I had to start waking up earlier. I recognize this about myself. When I'm at my ideal, I can jump from meeting to meeting. You know how y'all do. We put GPS, and I'm like, I'm going from this meeting to this meeting, and all I need is just the amount of time to walk in the door. I'm like, and when I'm ideal, I love that rhythm and the pace of life. In this season, I've had to write more margin into my life to say, man, I cannot just go from meeting to meeting because emotionally I don't have it. So I gotta put 45 minutes in between this meeting and this meeting because I might just need to breathe. I might just need to pray. I might just need to call a friend. Whatever you need, I might just need more space on the back end of my evenings. Reassess your margin, because sometimes what we need emotionally before we try to put on another smile or schedule another meeting is the margin to prepare our hearts to jump back into that place. And so build more margin into your life. Hopefully those 3 things, 1 or 2, are helpful for you.
That's awesome.
That's great. And we have one more question from Esther. She asks, how do you think we can healthily and biblically handle our start over season when it has to do with people who maliciously cause much of it? Excuse me.
Ooh, well, who asked that question again? I want to call her by name.
Miss Esther.
Miss Esther, I don't know if you're going to like my answer, but I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that so much of the biblical narrative has people in it that show us that the appropriate response to people who hurt us. And I could probably make a long list, but I think Jesus is probably the easiest to use, that he shows us consistently the proper response. And so we never compromise character in the midst of challenge, even when it was intentional, even when they hurt us. I think what Jesus shows us is that we have to learn to love in spite of. Now, love is not naivete, but love does have to consistently show up, patience, endurance in the midst of those moments. I think the other thing that we have to really, really work on, and I want to make sure I answer this question, in a strategic way, like, how do we handle our start over season? I think the other thing when we talk about biblically, because you referenced that, is we have to kind of look at what the people of Israel did. I think they're a great example of starting over. They were in Egyptian captivity for 400 years. They go into the wilderness, and it really feels like starting over. And the first thing they do is they say, okay, God, they seek God's voice for, what does the next season look like? What does the wilderness look like? And here's one of my favorite things about that season. They didn't have permanence, but they had God's presence. And so when you feel like you're starting over and you're like, man, I'm navigating this wilderness season, the best thing we can do is say, okay, God, I might not have permanence, but I have your presence. And whenever the cloud moved, they moved. And when the cloud settled, they settled. So here's the beauty of it. You may be in a cloudy season, but sometimes our cloudiest seasons are when we're the closest to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just encourage you to maybe read through that Old Testament passage, look at the wilderness journey, when they say, all right, God, like, I feel like this has made me start over, but as long as I'm with you, I may not know where I'm headed next, but I know you won't let me fall, and you won't lead me to a place that won't lead me to hell. And so, I would say study that passage of scripture, or that segment of scripture, and definitely let's always focus on forgiving others, because ultimately forgiveness is not about what we're giving to others; it's about what we're giving to ourselves to be able to move forward in freedom. All right.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.